Hello and welcome back to Rev Endurance Sports and another edition of, well, this is George Story Time. I thought that would be fun to do. That is a helium balloon from when I got 1,000 subscribers and we had a cake cutting right outside my shop door. So there you go. Well, today is George Story Time. And if you're not interested in this subject matter, please click off. There is no reason to do any hate down below of, oh my God, what a long drawn out story. Hey, look, no one's holding a gun to your head for you to listen to me talk. Click off. No reason to put negative comments down below. If you're interested in this subject matter, please stay on board. I'm going to tell you a story. Now, here is the reason, the impetus for this video. I believe it's a gentleman, not sure. Univega Supersport made a comment on one of my other videos, and I'm like, wow, eagle eye. This guy saw, I'm hoping it's a gentleman, saw this bike up on my bike rack here in the shop and asked questions about it. So I was like, wow, how did he see that? And this was in the rear derailleur hanger video about today's cycling tip about keep one at home. And if you're a mountain biker, keep it in your tool bag. So little coffee first. The comment says, how long have you had it? Was it used on the track, commuting or training? And then he's curious, or like I said, I think curious because I commuted using a fixed gear from 99 to 2003 and again in 2007. Then he makes a comment, about I got a lot out of it, easy to maintain, light, helped my pedal stroke get and stay smooth. The only problem is you can get lazy. The pedal can carry your foot through the upstroke over the top so you can develop a dead spot in your pedal stroke. Anyway, let's address some of these things in the form of a chronological history of the fixed gear bike. Now, gravel racing is all the rage now. And there's gravel bikes and gravel tires and gravel this and gravel that and gravel clothing and all that stuff. But way back in 2005, 2006 timeframe, I was trying to buy a fixed gear bike for a 500-mile race called the Furnace Creek 508. And this 500-mile race is an ultra, so it's 500 miles, 508 miles, with 35,000 feet of climbing in it. And I had done it in 2006 on a multi-speed bike, and I was curious about developing my ultra cycling ability on a fixed gear bike. So I had a Pinarello track bike that I was using for that purpose of, getting out, doing 100-milers, doing not that many 100-milers, but doing a few of them. And it was a very difficult process for me to go from a multi-speed bike to a fixed gear bike. And if anyone rides fixed gear, you really understand what I'm saying. If the rear wheel is in motion, your pedals are always turning. You can't coast, and you're limited to one gear. And let's make this distinction very early. A fixed gear, not single speed. So fixed gear means you are always pedaling. Single speed is, yes, it's one gear, but it's allowed to freewheel. And so if you're going down a mountain, you can keep your feet in your I keep them at 3 and 9 o'clock position, and boom, I descend. But on a fixed gear, you cannot do that. You have to be pedaling if you're going down a mountain, or any hill for that matter. Well, okay. So in 2006, I wanted to replace my Pinarello fixed gear bike, track bike, because the geometry, the seat tube was fairly steep. It was designed for riding track. It was about a 75.5 or 76 degree seat tube angle. And most road bikes are in the 73 for my size bike, which is about a 55 centimeter bike. And I was used to that 73 degree seat tube angle on my road bikes. And this seat tube angle was way too far forward. The head tube was shorter, just all kinds of stuff. It was not conducive to ultra cycling with it. Additionally, the rules for the Furnace Creek 508 were the bike had to be a steel bike with a steel fork. The rim depth could be no more than 25 millimeters. It had to be a fixed gear bike. And, you know, you had to basically at the beginning of the event declare what your gears were. So I typically ride a 49 chainring, and I just replaced the cogs in the back based on flatter terrain, hillier terrain, mountain terrain. So I couldn't use the Pinarello because that was an aluminum bike. I had to get a steel bike to do this race. And I signed up for the 2007 Furnace Creek 508 in the fixed gear division. I got the bike from a store. Sorry if the details are hazy, but it was somewhere in the Midwest. And when I called the guy and started talking to him, he told me about a race called Trans Iowa. And Trans Iowa is 300 and something miles, completely unsupported, and it's a gravel race. And so he said, hey, you do these 500-mile road races. Would you ever consider coming out to the Midwest and doing this thing in Iowa? I was like, so this was 2006. I was like, that's interesting, but it's a long way to go to Iowa and do a flat gravel race, which, of course, this is a big issue later when I actually do the race. Iowa's not flat. It's not flat by a long shot. Lots of steep rollers, lots of dirt and on the B roads. And then when you're on gravel, it's actually gravel. It's not dirt roads, it's gravel roads. So I talked to him in 2006, and he says, you know, as I'm speccing out my bike, and he says, well, no one finished, and I forget what year it was, either 2005 or 2006. No one finished it. So, you know, if you want to, you know, do something really hard, you need to put this on your calendar. Too many other commitments. I didn't do the race until 2009. But that's where I bought my fixed gear bike frame. And it was, I believe, 2006, because, of course, I raced it in 2007. So it had to be around that time frame. Now, this fixed gear bike, I still didn't like the head tube. So the mechanic who was at my shop, I was a store manager, he was able to cut down that head tube a little bit to match it more of my road bikes. But everything else was pretty much stock except for the color. Now, the one thing also, it was a long reach brake, so I couldn't use regular brakes on it. And yes, I use brakes on my fixed gear bike because I would ride it up and down mountains. And, you know, mountains here are 10, 12, 15-mile climbs, so that means it's a long descent as well. As a matter of fact, at the Furnace Creek 508, the longest descent is about 17 miles. And you start from 5,000 feet and you drop down to 200 feet below sea level, or 150 feet below sea level. So it's a long descent, and you need brakes. I mean, riding fixed gear bikes without brakes is kind of silly in my opinion. So that's the genesis of the frame. Then I built it up, and I'm going to walk out there and show you the spec on that bike. Now, that bike in 2007, I did the Furnace Creek 508. It took me 45 hours and 21 minutes to finish this 508-mile race with 35,000 feet of climbing and descending, 10 mountain passes. And I was destroyed. I mean, I had done a few 100-milers, a few 200-milers, and the answer to Univega Supersport, I was commuting with that bike to get my mileage up. I lived in Huntington Beach and was the store manager of a bike shop in Encinitas, and that was a 70-mile one-way ride. So I would wake up around 3, roll by 3:45 a.m., get down to the shop at around 7:45, so about a 4-hour commute, about 17 mile an hour average speed, if you care about that stuff. And shower, boom, get on the phones at 8, handling a lot of their e-commerce stuff. And then at 10 a.m., work the sales floor till 4 p.m., change out, and then ride home. And so 4 hours to ride in, but heading north for 4 hours is nothing but an onshore breeze or headwind, because as the coast hugs the waterline, you know, sometimes it's a headwind, sometimes a crosswind, but it's never a tailwind, it seems. And so 70 miles southbound, work an 8-hour shift, 70 miles northbound, except on Tuesdays and Thursdays, there was a shop ride that left San Clemente, went south, and so eventually I'd pick them up and then go north again with them. So I'd end up with like 80-something on my fixed gear bike. So about 140 to 150-ish miles per day of commuting. And that's how I got my endurance legs on a fixed gear bike. The climbing is only about 2,500 feet or so in either direction. So that wasn't a big deal. And it was doable in the fixed gear. In a 49-16, 49-15, because the thing about riding at the Furnace Creek 508 is you have to gear properly for the rolling and flat terrain, because if you gear towards the climbs and you get a gear that's easier to climb with, you're going to lose a lot of time over 500 miles with an easier gear to climb in, because your cruising speed isn't very fast. And so I raced the Furnace Creek 508 in a 49-17. If you don't know what that is, for those of you that ride compact cranks with a 50-tooth chainring, it's only one tooth different, right? So I had a 49. 50-tooth is your standard compact crank. And then think about being in the middle of your cassette. So if you're in your big ring, middle of your cassette, imagine being in that all day long, nighttime, all day long the next day, and nighttime again. So 45 hours. Obviously, I'm on and off the bike, taking care of my nature breaks. And there was a time also where all 3 of my crew members in the vehicle were falling asleep. And so we had to pull over for, I think it was either 45 minutes to an hour for them to nap so we could get back on the road. And that cost me some time. I couldn't sleep at, I don't know, 2 o'clock in the morning. Very tired. You would think you could sleep. I've never been able to sleep. That's been my Achilles heel of doing ultra bicycle races. I just can't sleep when I get off the bike. I'm falling asleep on the bike and I'm swerving all over the place. But once I stop, you know, they roll out the yoga mat or sleeping bag and I try to lay down, I can't sleep. You know, I keep hearing all the other racers go by and all the other SAG vehicles go by, and I can't sleep. So that's how I got the bike. Let me make sure. So no, it was never used on the track. It was used for commuting. It was used for training and racing. And I do understand the comment about your, because the pedals are always turning. You could create a dead spot over the top. I always rode both my geared bike, multi-speed bike, and my fixed gear bike interchangeably, just depending who I was riding with for the day. I didn't just exclusively ride my fixed gear bike all the time, only. So I was able to maintain a fluid pedal stroke in either bike that I was riding. All right, so purchased the bike, found out about Trans Iowa, did the fixed gear 508 in 2007. 2009, I did Trans Iowa, and only 15 out of 100 or whatever finished. I finished. Then, so that takes us up to 2009. This is important because after I did that fixed gear 500 miler, I didn't touch that bike except for going to coffee or getting a hot cocoa with my son. It was my grocery getter bike, my coffee shop bike, and probably no more than 5 to 10 mile rides ever on that fixed gear bike. That's how destroyed I was after that race. Then probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 years later, tried to ride it again. It was fun. Then during the lockdown, I rode it again just for fun. And this is a very, very hilly area here. I mean, it's easy to get 100 feet per mile in this area. I mean, without even searching it, you just roll around and it just continues to, the gain continues to accumulate. So it's very difficult to ride a fixed gear bike in this terrain, because you're going to have to gear pretty low because a lot of the climbs in this area, I mean, these are just regular streets, high traffic streets, 6-8%. And then if you are trying to avoid those high traffic streets and you're going through neighborhoods, 9, 10, 12, 15%. And then there's more than that. So it's very difficult to ride a fixed gear bike in this area. There is the coastal route, which is how I would get back and forth to work from home. But I'm about 6 miles inland from the water now, and it is very difficult to ride a fixed gear bike here. Okay, let's spend a few minutes going over the spec, because some of you that come to my channel, you're probably more of a gear person than other people and other channels. So let's go out, look at that bike, and talk about the spec on that bike. So for those campy diehard people, it does have Campagnolo brake levers. And I don't ride Campagnolo on my road bikes because, well, I ride it on this bike because there's no shifting. There's no gears to shift. There's no front derailleur, rear derailleur. There's nothing to shift. And I like the classic look of the brake levers, but they're just too small. Ergonomically, they just don't work for me. So you can see my hand, and this nub is always in the way. I just do not understand the ergonomics of this, okay? But anyway, so there's the brake lever, and as I mentioned before, it's a long reach brake. And I used to have fenders on here, but I never really rode in the rain, so I took the fenders off. But they are long reach. That's the only option I had here. It's built on fill wood high flange hubs. So if you don't know what that means, is, you know, most hubs would be around here, but this is called a high flange. And I just thought they looked really, really cool to be a high flange hub. They are bolted on. And so you always got, if you've been watching my channel for a while, I've mentioned that I've got 2 fire stations within literally 2 blocks in one direction and 2 blocks in the other direction. So I feel safe if I ever have a fire or a medical emergency, but there are going to be sirens. My shop is not in the hood. But, so we have a record crank set as well on a 49 chainring, as I mentioned before. So there's that for the folks that want to look at it. And then currently, I think I may have a 17 or an 18 cog back here. I did not clean this up for the video, so it is as is. Depending, of course, on which cog, you end up bolting it in different places. So what I really, or why, this is also the 25 millimeter Fusion velocity rims. And the 32 spoke, that was another spec that was required by the Furnace Creek 508. They had to be 32 spoke wheels and no more than 25 millimeter rim. But one of the reasons why I chose this fixed gear bike is this seat tube angle was a very road friendly seat tube angle. It was a 73, maybe 73 and a half, but it was very, very road friendly. So it was not track geometry. And a Brooks saddle, this is, in my opinion, essential if you're doing 500 milers, because as your cadence gets over 100, 115, 120, it's very hard once you're 300 miles into the race to pedal smoothly. It's extremely difficult to be a smooth pedaling, non-bouncing person. And you're going down a 17-mile descent, which is at mile 200 or so. And there's other mountains because there was 10 of them. But you're going down this descent, and you just have to pedal fairly high just to maintain a fairly good average speed for the day, or day and night. And you're on the brakes, but you're still pedaling over 100 cadence. And once you're 300, 400 miles into it, you just do not want to deal with pedaling at over 120 cadence, 125 cadence. You just don't want to do that anymore. This was made at the Waterford, if anyone knows that brand, made there. And this is kind of cool. I love the head badge. Not a selling point, but a nice bonus. You rarely get head badges on fixed gear bikes. But I always thought that this was super cool. And sorry about the cable giving it shade or shadows. But there it is. Okay, so that's all for this bike. You can see the Chris King headset there. And, oh, funny thing about this, I had this color spec'd out. It's a Chrysler red something something. It's got a lot of sparkle in it, but you can't see it here indoors. But it is more of a gloss, not a gloss, but like a little bit of a metal flake type of thing. It's really, really, really nice color. And I had the Thompson stem anodized to match this, but the Thompson stem only had 2 bolts, and one day I'm out on a ride and the faceplate cracked, and you're riding a fixed gear bike, so you can't coast. The faceplate cracked and I nearly ate it. And I was able to bring the bike to a stop, but my handlebars, you know, had fallen down to the front wheel, and I'm just trying to hold on to the brakes and trying to backpedal as well. So that was a very interesting day when that Thompson stem broke. Okay, well, that's all for today. And if you have any further questions, please feel free to ask them. I thought it'd be interesting to tell you about this bike. By the way, the red-eyed Vario, that is what Rev Endurance Sports stands for, Rev Cycling, all of that. That's REV, Red-Eyed Vario. That's my name when I do ultra cycling races. You don't get bib numbers. You get a name. Well, you pick an animal name, and the Red-Eyed Vario is the bird that is on my clothing, such as that right there. Okay, so thank you for your time and your attention. I don't mind at all that I was long-winded. This bike deserves a lot more attention because I have done a lot of pain and suffering on this bike. All right, thank you so much for your time and your attention. I appreciate you allowing me to talk about this bike and my history with it. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see you up the road.